The cycle never seems to break. You work longer hours, take on additional responsibilities, maybe even pick up a second job. The effort is undeniable. The dedication is real. Yet somehow the financial pressure remains constant. Bills arrive with the same urgency. Unexpected expenses still catch you off guard. The gap between what you earn and what you need feels like it's barely shrinking, if at all. There's a frustration that settles in when you realize that working harder hasn't translated into the financial stability you expected. This isn't about laziness or lack of ambition. This is about something else entirely. Most people assume the solution lies in earning more money. They believe that if they could just increase their income by 20%, 30%, or even double it, their financial troubles would disappear. This assumption seems logical on the surface. More money should equal less financial stress. But observation reveals a different pattern. People who receive raises often find themselves in similar positions months later. Lottery winners, despite sudden wealth, frequently return to financial struggle within a few years. Those who inherit substantial amounts discover that their money problems weren't solved permanently. The conventional wisdom suggests that inflation is the culprit. Rising costs eat away at purchasing power faster than wages can keep up. Housing prices climb beyond reach. Healthcare costs spiral upward. Education expenses multiply. While these factors certainly exist, they don't explain why some individuals navigate these same economic pressures with apparent ease, while others struggle regardless of their income level. Perhaps the issue is personal spending habits. Maybe it's about cutting expenses, creating budgets, or developing better financial discipline. Yet careful examination shows people who meticulously track every dollar, who avoid unnecessary purchases, who follow every piece of conventional financial advice, still finding themselves trapped in the same cycle of financial pressure. Their restraint and discipline haven't produced the stability they sought. The problem isn't income, it isn't inflation, it isn't poor spending habits, it isn't lack of effort or dedication. This is not a financial problem, it is structural, and this structure shows up in ordinary moments. Money arrives and disappears. You plan for the month, and an unexpected expense resets everything. You earn a little more, but your obligations expand at the same pace. There is never room to breathe, never margin, never a sense of arrival. Money operates according to principles that aren't immediately visible. Like water finding its level, money moves according to forces that exist beneath surface awareness. These forces determine whether money accumulates or dissipates, whether it grows or stagnates, whether it provides security or constant anxiety. Understanding these forces requires looking beyond the obvious mechanics of earning and spending. Consider how certain individuals seem to attract money effortlessly, while others repel it despite their best intentions. The difference isn't necessarily in their skills, intelligence, or work ethic. The difference lies in their alignment with the underlying structure that governs how money moves and responds. For some, money moves through their hands without staying. They support others while remaining under pressure themselves. They absorb emergencies that are not their own. Their income rises, but relief never arrives. This structure operates independently of economic conditions, personal effort, or external circumstances. It functions according to laws that remain constant regardless of market fluctuations, political changes, or social trends. When someone understands and aligns with this structure, money begins to respond differently. When they operate against it or remain unaware of it, money becomes elusive and unstable. This same pressure appears early in the life of Jacob, long before wealth ever arrives. The biblical account of Jacob provides clear confirmation of this structural reality. Jacob's financial situation wasn't determined by market conditions or his work ethic. He was diligent, capable, and willing to work. Yet for years, despite his efforts, he remained in a position of financial dependence and instability. He worked for his uncle Laban for 7 years to marry Rachel, only to be deceived and forced to work another 7 years. Even after fulfilling his obligations, he continued working for Laban for additional years, building wealth that belonged primarily to his employer. Jacob's situation illustrates how effort without proper structural alignment produces limited results. He was skilled in animal husbandry. He understood livestock management. He was willing to work long hours in challenging conditions. Yet his financial position remained precarious because he operated within a structure that directed the benefits of his labor elsewhere. The transformation in Jacob's circumstances didn't come through working harder or developing new skills. It came through a shift in the underlying structure that governed his relationship with money and resources. When this structure changed, his financial reality changed dramatically. The same skills that had previously generated modest results for him began producing extraordinary abundance. This transformation occurred when Jacob entered into an agreement with Laban regarding wages. Instead of receiving fixed compensation, Jacob proposed taking the speckled and spotted animals from the flocks as his payment. This seemed like a disadvantageous arrangement since such animals were relatively rare among the herds. Laban quickly agreed, believing he had secured an excellent deal for himself. However, something remarkable happened. The proportion of speckled and spotted animals born to the flocks increased dramatically. Jacob's portion of the livestock grew at an unprecedented rate. Within a relatively short time, he accumulated vast herds of cattle, sheep, goats, and camels, along with servants and other wealth. His financial position shifted from dependent laborer to independently wealthy. This transformation reveals the structural principle at work. Jacob's change in circumstances wasn't the result of harder work or better animal husbandry techniques. The same skills he had possessed all along suddenly produced vastly different results. The difference was his alignment with a structure that allowed money and resources to flow toward him rather than away from him. Money responds to structure, not effort. This principle explains why some people experience financial breakthrough after years of struggle, while others work their entire lives without achieving financial stability. It explains why certain decisions seem to unlock financial flow, while others, despite appearing logical, lead to continued stagnation. The structure that governs money operates through patterns that remain consistent across time and culture. These patterns determine whether someone experiences financial scarcity or abundance, regardless of their income level or economic environment. Someone earning a modest salary who aligns with this structure may experience greater financial stability than someone earning a substantial income who operates against it. This structure involves the flow of value, the positioning of resources, and the alignment of actions with principles that govern how money accumulates and multiplies. It's not about working harder or earning more. It's about understanding how money moves and positioning yourself in alignment with that movement. Most people approach money from a scarcity perspective. They focus on protecting what they have, minimizing expenses, and avoiding financial risks. While these approaches may provide temporary stability, they don't create the conditions for sustainable abundance. They operate from a defensive position that, by its nature, limits growth and expansion. Protection feels responsible, but protection without structure produces stagnation. The structural approach recognizes that money is attracted to value creation and tends to multiply when it encounters the proper conditions. Instead of focusing on conservation, this approach emphasizes circulation, investment, and strategic positioning. Money that moves purposefully tends to return multiplied. Money that remains static tends to lose value over time. This principle explains why some individuals can start with very little and build substantial wealth, while others inherit significant amounts and lose it. The difference isn't in the starting amount, but in their understanding of how money responds to different structural approaches. The structural approach also recognizes that money operates within relationships and systems. Individual effort, while important, is only one component of a larger framework that includes other people, institutions, and environmental factors. Success comes from understanding how to position yourself advantageously within these systems, rather than trying to overcome them through individual effort alone. This doesn't mean that hard work is unnecessary. It means that hard work directed through proper structure produces exponentially greater results than hard work applied without structural understanding. Jacob worked just as hard after his transformation as before, but his results were dramatically different because his work was now aligned with a structure that multiplied its impact. Effort alone does not fail. Effort fails inside the wrong structure. Money does not resist hard work. It resists misalignment. The structural approach requires a shift in perspective from earning money to attracting money. Earning money is linear and limited by time, energy, and direct effort. Attracting money is exponential and operates according to principles that can produce results beyond direct input. This shift doesn't happen through wishful thinking or positive psychology. It happens through understanding and applying specific structural principles. These principles involve timing, positioning, value creation, relationship building, and resource allocation. They operate according to patterns that can be observed and understood, though they require careful attention and often run counter to conventional financial wisdom. Timing involves understanding when to act and when to wait, when to invest and when to preserve capital, when to take risks and when to maintain security. This isn't about predicting market movements or economic trends. It's about recognizing structural indicators that suggest favorable or unfavorable conditions for specific financial actions. Positioning involves understanding where to direct energy and resources for maximum impact. This includes geographical positioning, market positioning, relationship positioning, and asset positioning. Small changes in positioning can produce dramatic differences in results, while major efforts applied in poor positions often yield minimal returns. Value creation involves identifying and developing resources, capabilities, or solutions that others find valuable enough to exchange money for. This isn't necessarily about creating new products or services. It's about recognizing existing value that isn't being properly utilized or positioned in the marketplace. Relationship building involves understanding how financial success operates within networks of human connection. Money moves through relationships, and sustainable wealth building requires understanding how to create and maintain relationships that facilitate this movement. Resource allocation involves understanding how to distribute available capital, time, and energy across different opportunities to maximize overall returns while managing risk. This includes diversification principles, investment timing, and the balance between immediate needs and future growth. These principles work together to create a structure that either attracts or repels money. When someone aligns all these elements properly, money begins to flow toward them from multiple sources and in ways that often seem unexpected or even miraculous to outside observers. The key insight is that money responds to this structural alignment regardless of external economic conditions. During economic downturns, some people experience financial hardship while others find unprecedented opportunities. During periods of prosperity, some people benefit significantly while others struggle to keep pace with rising costs. The difference isn't in the external conditions, but in their structural alignment. This explains why financial advice that works for some people fails completely for others. The advice may be technically correct, but if it doesn't align with the person's structural position, it won't produce the expected results. Conversely, actions that seem counterintuitive or even risky may produce excellent results when they align with proper structure. Understanding this principle changes how someone approaches financial decisions. Instead of asking whether they can afford something, they ask whether it aligns with value creation and proper structure. Instead of focusing solely on reducing expenses, they focus on increasing the efficiency and impact of their resource allocation. Instead of avoiding all risks, they distinguish between risks that align with structural principles and those that oppose them. This structural understanding also explains why many wealthy individuals seem to make financial decisions that appear counterintuitive to those struggling financially. Their decisions aren't based on the same framework that most people use. They operate from an understanding of structure that allows them to see opportunities and make moves that others can't recognize or understand. The biblical account demonstrates this clearly. Jacob's decision to accept payment in speckled and spotted animals appeared disadvantageous from a conventional perspective. Most people in his position would have negotiated for a guaranteed wage or a larger percentage of the overall flock. But Jacob understood something about structure that allowed him to see the potential in what appeared to be an unfavorable arrangement. This same principle operates today. Opportunities that appear risky or unprofitable from a conventional perspective may actually align perfectly with structural principles. Investments that seem guaranteed and safe may actually oppose structural flow and lead to stagnation or loss. The challenge is that this structural understanding can't be reduced to simple rules or formulas. It requires developing sensitivity to patterns and principles that operate beneath surface appearances. It involves learning to recognize structural indicators that suggest when conditions are favorable for specific types of financial moves. This development takes time and often involves making mistakes that provide valuable learning experiences. Most people prefer clear, predictable systems that guarantee specific outcomes. But structural understanding operates more like developing artistic ability or athletic skill. It improves through practice, observation, and gradual refinement of judgment. The good news is that anyone can develop this understanding regardless of their current financial position or educational background. It doesn't require advanced degrees, special connections, or large amounts of starting capital. It requires attention, patience, and willingness to think differently about how money operates. The process begins with observing patterns rather than focusing on individual financial events. Most people analyze their financial situation in terms of specific income sources, expenses, or investment returns. Structural thinking looks at how these elements relate to each other and to larger patterns of flow and accumulation. This observation reveals that money tends to move toward individuals and organizations that create value for others, that position themselves strategically within systems and relationships, that understand timing and positioning, and that operate from abundance rather than scarcity. It also reveals that money tends to move away from individuals who operate primarily from fear, who focus on protection rather than creation, who remain isolated from valuable relationships and networks, and who make decisions based on short-term survival rather than long-term structural positioning. These patterns operate consistently, regardless of economic conditions, political systems, or cultural contexts. They represent fundamental principles about how value moves through human systems and how individuals can position themselves to benefit from this movement. The biblical account of Jacob provides one example of these principles in action, but the same patterns can be observed throughout history and across cultures. Individuals who understand and apply structural principles consistently achieve financial results that appear extraordinary to those operating from conventional frameworks. However, structural understanding extends beyond personal financial benefit. When someone aligns with these principles, they typically create value for others in the process. Jacob's prosperity didn't come at Laban's expense. The overall productivity and value of the flocks increased, benefiting everyone involved in the operation. This principle suggests that true wealth building operates through value creation rather than value extraction. Sustainable financial success comes from increasing the total value available rather than simply capturing a larger share of existing value. This approach resolves the tension that many people feel about pursuing financial success. They worry that becoming wealthy requires taking advantage of others or operating selfishly. But structural wealth building actually requires creating value for others as a fundamental component of the process. The most successful businesses, investments, and financial strategies consistently demonstrate this principle. They succeed because they create genuine value for customers, partners, and stakeholders. Their financial returns are a natural result of the value they contribute to the larger system. Understanding this removes much of the guilt and conflict that people often feel about pursuing financial success. Instead of viewing money as something to be extracted from others, they can view it as a natural result of contributing value to human systems and relationships. This perspective also changes how someone approaches financial challenges. Instead of viewing obstacles as enemies to overcome, they can view them as information about structural misalignment. Financial pressure often indicates that current approaches aren't creating sufficient value or aren't positioned properly within available systems and relationships. This reframe transforms frustration into curiosity and learning. Instead of working harder at approaches that aren't producing desired results, someone can step back and examine whether their current structure aligns with principles that attract money and create sustainable value. The process requires patience because structural changes often take time to produce visible results. Jacob worked for years under one structure before transitioning to a different approach that produced rapid transformation. The timing of his transition was crucial. If he had attempted the same strategy earlier, it might not have succeeded because the conditions weren't yet favorable. This timing component explains why some people experience sudden financial breakthroughs after years of struggle. The breakthrough isn't necessarily the result of a single decision or action. It's the culmination of structural positioning that finally aligns with favorable conditions and produces dramatic results. Understanding this prevents discouragement during periods when effort doesn't seem to produce proportional results. These periods often represent necessary preparation and positioning for future opportunities that will produce much greater returns. The key is maintaining focus on structural principles rather than short-term results. When someone consistently applies value creation, proper positioning, strategic timing, and relationship building, they create conditions that attract financial opportunity even when specific outcomes aren't immediately visible. This requires faith in the process rather than faith in specific outcomes. The structure will produce results, but those results may not take the form originally expected. Flexibility and openness to unexpected opportunities become crucial components of structural success. Jacob's story continues beyond his initial transformation. His newly acquired wealth created new challenges and opportunities that tested his structural understanding in different ways. The same principles that produced his breakthrough needed to be applied in new contexts as his circumstances changed. His journey illustrates that structural understanding isn't a one-time achievement, but an ongoing development process. In his case, the wealth he accumulated through proper structural alignment eventually created tension with his employer and neighbors. The dramatic increase in his resources generated envy and concern among those around him. This forced him to make difficult decisions about how to maintain his position while preserving important relationships. The situation reached a point where remaining in his current location was no longer sustainable. Despite his success, or perhaps because of it, he needed to transition to a completely different environment. This transition required him to trust that the same structural principles that had produced his wealth would continue to operate in new circumstances and relationships. This aspect of his story reveals another important structural principle. Sustainable wealth building often requires periodic transitions that align with changing conditions and opportunities. What produces success in one phase may become limiting in the next phase. Structural understanding includes knowing when to maintain current approaches and when to evolve toward new strategies and positions. Many people become attached to specific strategies or circumstances that have produced good results for them. They continue applying the same approaches even when conditions have changed and different strategies would be more effective. This attachment can limit their continued growth and eventually lead to stagnation or decline. Structural thinking maintains focus on underlying principles while remaining flexible about specific applications. The principles remain constant, but their application evolves as circumstances, relationships, and opportunities change. This requires ongoing attention and learning rather than relying on past successes to guarantee future results. Each new situation provides opportunities to deepen structural understanding and develop more sophisticated applications of fundamental principles. The process never really ends because human systems and relationships continue evolving, creating new challenges and opportunities that require fresh applications of structural wisdom. This ongoing development is part of what makes structural wealth building sustainable over long periods and changing circumstances. Jacob's journey from financial dependence to independent wealth, and then to navigating the challenges that wealth creates, provides a template for understanding how structural principles operate across different phases of financial development. Each phase requires different applications of the same underlying principles. In the next account, this same structure produces wealth, and then it begins to test it. Because the same alignment that creates increase can accelerate loss when restraint disappears.